Smoky Mountains, North Carolina. Late autumn, 1877. While most settlers rushed to stockpile cord after cord of firewood before the killing cold arrived, one man was digging. Not for gold, not for water. He was excavating beneath where his cabin would stand, carving chambers into the mountain itself. And his neighbors thought he'd lost his mind. What did this solitary frontiersman understand about the earth beneath his feet that college-educated engineers from back east had completely missed? What ancient principle was he applying that would keep his family warm through blizzards and cool through brutal summer heat, using half the fuel everyone else burned? Before we reveal the answer, do me a favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to show you frontier engineering secrets that modern builders have completely forgotten. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know how many of you are ready to learn what our ancestors knew about living in harmony with nature. Stick with me through this story, and I promise you'll never look at your own home the same way again. The man's name was Josiah Drummond, and what he built would challenge everything the settlement thought they knew about survival. Josiah Drummond arrived in the Smoky Mountain settlement of Cataract Creek with his wife Emma and 3 children in September 1877. He was a quiet man, mid-40s, with hands scarred from a lifetime of stonework. He'd come from Vermont, but before that, his father had emigrated from the Scottish Highlands, a detail the local builders would soon use to mock him. Within a week of purchasing his land, a slope plot 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, Drummond began construction in a way that baffled everyone who saw it. Instead of immediately raising walls, he spent 2 full weeks excavating. Not just a root cellar. He was digging a network of stone-lined chambers directly beneath where his cabin floor would sit, extending 8 feet down into the mountain soil. "Man's building a grave, not a home," muttered Jacob Bradley, the settlement's most experienced builder. Bradley had constructed 17 cabins in the valley and was considered the authority on frontier architecture. He'd studied carpentry back in Philadelphia before heading west. When he rode out to inspect Drummond's work, he found a Vermonter lining his underground chambers with carefully selected sandstone, angling them in ways that made no structural sense. "You're wasting time and stone," Bradley told him flatly. "That depth serves no purpose except making you dig twice as far. Ground freezes 18 inches down here. Anything below that is fool's labor." Drummond didn't argue. He simply continued working, extending horizontal tunnels from his main chamber at precise angles, 45 degrees to the south, 30 degrees to the north. Emma brought him water and cornbread at midday. His children carried stones. The settlement watched and whispered. "Highland ignorance," Bradley pronounced at the general store. His father probably built stacked stone hovels with dirt floors. Drummond doesn't understand American construction. Others nodded. The consensus formed quickly. The Vermonter was building wrong, wasting effort, applying old-world superstition to new-world soil. By late October, when sensible men were chinked and shuttered, Drummond was still below ground, installing what appeared to be clay pipes connecting his chambers to the surface. The mockery intensified. Children from neighboring homesteads came to watch the strange man dig. Someone chalked Drummond's folly on a plank and stuck it in his dirt pile. But Josiah Drummond kept working. He'd seen something similar in his childhood, had felt its effects, and he trusted the physics even if he couldn't articulate the thermodynamics. The earth, he knew, remembered. It stored. It gave back. For 1,000 pounds of carefully positioned sandstone would prove him right. He just needed winter to arrive. What Drummond was building had a name in the Highland villages his father came from, a breathing stone foundation. The principle was ancient, refined over centuries in climates where fuel was scarce and winters could kill. It relied on 3 physics concepts that frontier America had largely forgotten: thermal mass, earth coupling, and seasonal heat exchange. The main chamber Drummond excavated measured 8 feet deep, 12 feet long, and 9 feet wide, positioned directly beneath what would become his cabin's central living space. But depth was only part of the design. He lined every surface with sandstone slabs, each piece at least 3 inches thick, fitted tight enough that mortar barely showed. The total mass of stone in that chamber alone exceeded 4,000 pounds. Sandstone wasn't random choice. Drummond had tested rocks from the creek, from the ridge, from the old quarry site 2 miles north. He'd heated them by his campfire and timed how long they stayed warm. Sandstone held heat 3 times longer than the granite Bradley favored for foundations. It absorbed slowly, critical for summer. It released slowly, essential for winter. Specific heat capacity of roughly 0.2 BTU per pound per degree Fahrenheit. Drummond didn't know those numbers, but he knew the feel. The angled tunnels extending from his main chamber were the system's lungs. The southern tunnel, angled at 45 degrees, ran 18 feet through soil before opening near ground level on the hillside sunny exposure. The northern tunnel, gentler at 30 degrees, extended 22 feet before emerging in shade. Each tunnel was lined with the same sandstone and measured 14 inches in diameter, narrow enough to maintain air pressure, wide enough for significant flow. Bradley, riding past in early November, saw Drummond installing wooden louvers at each tunnel mouth. Air vents to his cellar, he scoffed to his apprentice. As if cold air needs help sinking. He didn't understand that Drummond was creating a convection loop, a gravitational heat engine powered by temperature differential and stone memory. The physics were elegant. In winter, when Drummond burned his firebox, a small, efficient masonry stove he'd built into the cabin's north wall, warm air would rise naturally. That created negative pressure, drawing cold exterior air through the southern tunnel. But before that cold air could chill his floor, it traveled 18 feet through sandstone that had been absorbing residual earth warmth since September. By the time it entered the main chamber, ambient temperature had risen 7 to 11 degrees. The massive stone walls absorbed heat from the cabin above, stored it, and radiated it back through the night. Summer reversed the cycle. Hot air entering the southern tunnel met stone that had been cooled all winter and spring by the 54-degree earth temperature at 8-foot depth. The northern tunnel, shaded and angled for passive draw, exhausted warm air that rose naturally from the living space. The result, continuous gentle cooling without ice, without fans, without any technology except gravity, stone, and patient design. You've built a stone maze that'll trap damp and rot your floors, Bradley declared when he saw the finished foundation in late November. I'll wager $20 your family's shivering by January while you waste your time feeding that foolish burrow. Drummond's only response, we'll see what the mountain remembers. By December 1877, Drummond's cabin stood complete. The structure itself appeared conventional. Hewn logs, tight chinking, a shake-shingled roof with proper overhang. But beneath the pine plank floor, invisible to visitors, his thermal engine waited. The firebox he'd built wasn't centered like Bradley's designs. It sat offset to the north wall, compact and efficient. 18 inches wide, 24 inches deep, lined with firebrick salvage from an old kiln. The firebox connected to a short chimney. Yes, but it also linked through a series of carefully angled iron pipes to the stone chamber below. Drummond had scavenged 3 sections of 6-inch stovepipe from an abandoned forge and installed them at calculated positions, one descending vertically into the chamber center, 2 others angling to opposite corners. When he burned wood, approximately 40% of the heat radiated directly into the living space. The remaining 60% descended into those 4,000 pounds of waiting sandstone. Emma Drummond, setting up her kitchen in early December, noticed immediately that the floor felt warm. Not hot, warm. Like sun-heated rock, she told Josiah. The sensation was unfamiliar to frontier families, whose floors typically froze solid by January, requiring multiple rag rugs and constant vigilance against frostbite. The convection design revealed its genius on December 19th, when the first serious cold front dropped temperatures to 9 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. While neighboring cabins roared with fire, consuming log after log to fight the cold pouring through floor cracks and poorly fitted doors, Drummond burned a modest fire from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., then let it die to coals. At the Johnsons' cabin, 2 miles east, The family woke at 4 a.m. to restart their fire, shivering in 40-degree interior cold. At the Drummonds, Emma woke to 58 degrees, maintained entirely by heat radiating from the stone mass below. The differential seemed impossible. Johnson burned 6 times the wood and achieved less comfort. Visitors started coming. They'd heard rumors. When Margaret Foster stepped inside on December 23rd, she actually gasped. "It's warmer than our cabin with a fire roaring," she said. "What sorcery is this?" Drummond invited her to place her hand on the floor. The planks radiated gentle, consistent warmth. He opened a small hatch he'd built near the firebox, revealing the stone chamber below, still releasing heat absorbed 8 hours earlier. "Stone remembers warmth," he explained simply. "Holds it. Give it back slow. Air from outside comes through the hill, warms on the way, then rises through the floor. Circle never stops." He showed her the tunnel mouths, explained the angle calculations, described how Earth temperature stayed stable year-round at depth. Margaret returned home and told her husband everything. He dismissed it as luck and exaggeration. But word spread. By early January, Bradley himself came to inspect, convinced there was trickery involved, perhaps a hidden secondary stove or inferior thermometers creating false readings. He found neither. What he found was a cabin maintaining 64 degrees Fahrenheit in the living space and 56 degrees in the sleeping loft, using 1/3 the fuel his own design required. The stone chamber, when Bradley descended on a ladder Drummond provided, registered 58 degrees, warmer than the exterior by 47 degrees, warmer than an unheated cabin by 33 degrees. "Winter's one thing," Bradley muttered, climbing back up. "This'll be a damp, moldy sweatbox come August. Mark my words, you've built a seasonal shelter, not a year-round home." It was the only criticism he could muster, and he delivered it with the confidence of a man who'd never been proven wrong. Drummond simply nodded. Summer would answer. January 12, 1878. The temperature plunged to 18 degrees below zero, the coldest night in Cataract Creek's recorded history. The settlement had experienced hard winters before, but this was different. Killing cold, the kind that cracked trees, froze livestock in their pens, and tested every cabin's construction against the physics of survival. Before we continue with what happened that night, I need you to hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you think about heating and insulation forever. And please, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you somewhere cold right now? Huh? Moderate? I'm curious how many climates are represented in this audience. Now, back to the story. At the Bradley household, Jacob woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of his wife's teeth chattering. Despite a fire that had consumed 11 logs since sunset, the interior temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. The family huddled together under every quilt they owned. Bradley rose, fed 4 more logs into his fireplace. A traditional design, wide and deep, built according to Philadelphia specifications, and waited for warmth that came slowly, reluctantly. His cabin's floor was frigid. Ice had formed on the inside of the window shutters. His children's water basin showed a 1/4 inch of ice despite being positioned near the hearth. Bradley burned wood faster, creating a roaring blaze that finally brought the living area to 52 degrees by dawn. Fuel consumption for that single night: 19 logs, each approximately 16 inches in diameter and 24 inches long. Estimated weight: 230 pounds of oak and hickory, reduced to ash and smoke. 3 miles west, the Drummond family slept through the night. Josiah had burned his evening fire as usual, modest, controlled, allowed to die by midnight. When Emma woke at 6 a.m. to start breakfast, she reached for her shawl by habit, then realized she didn't need it. The cabin interior registered 62 degrees Fahrenheit. The floor was warm to bare feet. No ice on the shutters. No frost on the water bucket. The stone chamber below had performed exactly as designed. Throughout the night, as exterior temperatures dropped to lethal levels, the thermal mass had released stored heat in a slow, steady exchange. The convection loop had continued, cold air entering through the southern tunnel, traveling 18 feet through sandstone that maintained Earth temperature. arriving in the chamber already tempered to 48 degrees, then warming further as it absorbed radiant heat from the stone walls before rising through floor vents into the living space. Josiah's fuel consumption that night: 7 logs, smaller diameter, approximately 90 pounds total. Heat output comparison: Bradley's fireplace operated at roughly 15 to 20% efficiency, with most warmth escaping up his wide chimney. Drummond's compact firebox, coupled with thermal mass storage, achieved an effective efficiency near 73% when heat retention was factored across 12 hours. By mid-morning, word had spread through the settlement. Families emerged from their cabins exhausted, having fought cold all night, and began comparing experiences. The pattern was clear: conventional designs had failed the extreme test. Only Drummond's cabin, the one they'd mocked as Highland ignorance, had maintained genuine comfort. Jacob Bradley arrived at Drummond's door at noon, his pride visibly struggling against his professional curiosity. "I need to understand this," he said simply. Josiah invited him in. For 2 hours, Bradley examined every aspect of the system, measured the chamber dimensions, felt the stone temperature, traced the airflow, calculated the thermal mass, and tested the floor warmth with his own hands. When he emerged, he found a small crowd waiting, 11 men from surrounding homesteads, all asking the same question: "Can you build this for us?" Bradley looked at Drummond. The Vermonter's expression held no triumph, no smugness, just quiet validation. "I can teach you," Drummond said, "but we'll need to wait for spring. Can't excavate frozen ground." The men nodded, willing to wait now that winter had proven what words couldn't. But winter's test was only half the story. Summer would deliver the final verdict on whether Bradley's prediction about heat and humidity held any truth. August 7th, 1878. The heat wave arrived with brutal intensity. For 6 consecutive days, temperatures climbed above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, with the mercury touching 101 degrees on the afternoon of August 9th. The settlement suffered. Families abandoned their cabins during peak heat, seeking shade by the creek or in root cellars. Indoor temperatures became unbearable, routinely exceeding 88 degrees by mid-afternoon. Jacob Bradley's cabin, built with thick log walls he believed would insulate against summer heat, became an oven. The large fireplace he designed for winter warmth now worked against him. The massive stone chimney absorbed solar radiation all day and radiated it back into the living space all night. By 3 p.m. on August 9th, his interior temperature reached 92 degrees. His wife took the children to sleep outdoors under canvas. Bradley himself spent the night on his porch, defeated by his own design. At the Drummond cabin, a different physics was unfolding. As exterior temperatures climbed, the system Josiah had built began its summer cycle, reversing the winter flow through simple thermodynamic principles that required no adjustment, no manual intervention. Hot air, being less dense, rose naturally from the living space toward the ceiling. Drummond had installed a series of small vents along the roof peak, vents that Bradley had criticized as leak points back in December. Those vents, combined with the northern tunnel opening in the shaded hillside, created a passive exhaust system. Hot air escaped upward and outward. The negative pressure this created drew air through the southern tunnel. But now, instead of warming the incoming air, the stone chambers cooled it. The sandstone mass, insulated by 8 feet of earth, had maintained its temperature near 54 degrees throughout spring and early summer. When 95-degree air entered the southern tunnel, it traveled 18 feet through stone that was 41 degrees cooler. The temperature drop was measurable and dramatic. By the time exterior air reached the main stone chamber, it had cooled to approximately 72 degrees, a 23-degree reduction through passive earth coupling alone. As this cooled air rose through the floor vents, it absorbed minimal additional heat from the stone mass, entering the living space at 74 to 76 degrees. The continuous flow, driven entirely by convection and density differential, created a natural cooling current. Emma Drummond, preparing dinner on August 9th while neighboring families sweltered outside, worked in an interior temperature of 78 degrees. Comfortable, livable. Her children played indoors instead of seeking shade. Josiah sat at his workbench repairing harness leather, his forehead dry. When Margaret Foster arrived at 4 p.m., seeking refuge from her own cabin's 90-degree interior, she stood in Drummond's doorway and actually shivered. "It's 20 degrees cooler in here," she said, disbelieving. "How is this possible?" Josiah walked her through the system again, showed her the airflow, had her place her hand over a floor vent to feel the cool air rising, then over a ceiling vent to feel the warm exhaust. The stone chamber below, when she descended to see it, felt like a spring cellar, cool, dry, stable. Word spread faster than it had in winter. By August 12th, 17 men had visited Drummond's cabin to experience the cooling effect firsthand. Bradley came on August 13th, thermometer in hand, determined to measure and verify. He recorded exterior temperature at 3 p.m., 97 degrees. Drummond's interior temperature, 76 degrees. A 21-degree differential achieved without ice, without fans, without any energy input except the patient thermal mass of 4,000 pounds of stone and the free work of gravity acting on air density. Bradley took measurements at multiple points: floor level, waist height, ceiling, inside the stone chamber, at both tunnel mouths. The data confirmed what his professional pride didn't want to accept. Drummond had engineered a year-round climate control system using nothing but stone, earth, geometry, and an understanding of heat transfer that Bradley's Philadelphia training had never taught him. "The humidity," Bradley said, grasping for criticism. "Surely you're breeding mold in those chambers." Drummond handed him a candle and invited him back down the ladder. The stone walls were dry. No condensation. No mildew smell. The airflow prevented moisture accumulation, another detail the Highland design had anticipated. Bradley climbed back up, set down his thermometer, and asked the question he'd been avoiding since January. "Will you teach me to build this?" Drummond's answer was immediate. "Yes. But not just you. Anyone who wants to learn." The knowledge, he believed, shouldn't be hoarded. Winter had proven warmth. Summer had proven cooling. Now the real work began, spreading the technique before another generation forgot what the earth could do. By late September 1878, Josiah Drummond had received requests from 23 families within a 50-mile radius. Some had visited his cabin personally. Others had heard accounts from neighbors who'd measured the temperature differential themselves. The evidence was undeniable, quantified, and replicable. What had been dismissed as Highland ignorance 11 months earlier was now the most sought-after construction knowledge in the region. Drummond organized the teaching methodically. He wouldn't build the systems for money. That felt wrong, like profiting from something his father had freely shared with him. Instead, he offered to supervise construction, teaching the principles hands-on so each family understood not just the what but the why. The physics needed to be transferred, not just the technique. The first student was, surprisingly, Jacob Bradley. The master builder arrived at Drummond's land on September 22nd with a proposal. "Teach me properly, and I'll help you teach the others. Between us, we can spread this faster and better." It was as close to an apology as Bradley's pride would allow, but Drummond recognized the olive branch and accepted it. Together, they excavated the first teaching project at the Morrison homestead, 6 miles south. Drummond explained every decision. Why 8 feet deep instead of 6 or 10? Why sandstone instead of limestone or granite? Why the southern tunnel angled at 45 degrees instead of 30 or 60? Bradley, to his credit, asked genuine questions instead of defending his old methods. He measured heat capacity using Drummond's campfire test. He calculated thermal mass ratios. He began to see the foundation not as a static base, but as a dynamic thermal engine. By November 1878, 4 complete systems were operational. By spring 1879, that number had grown to 11. By winter 1880, 17 cabins within the Cataract Creek settlement incorporated Drummond's breathing stone foundation, each adapted slightly to local conditions, slope angles, and available materials, but all built on the same principles of earth coupling, thermal mass, and passive convection. The results were consistent. Families reported fuel savings between 40 and 60% compared to conventional designs. Interior temperature stability improved dramatically. Winter lows rarely dropped below 58 degrees, even during cold snaps. Summer highs rarely exceeded 79 degrees during heat waves. The comfort difference was life-changing, particularly for families with young children or elderly members vulnerable to temperature extremes. Jacob Bradley, having built 7 of these systems by 1880, became an advocate as passionate as Drummond himself. When a circuit-riding preacher visited the settlement and asked about the unusual construction method he'd seen, Bradley gave him a tour of 3 different implementations, complete with thermometer readings and fuel consumption calculations. The preacher, who traveled extensively through Appalachian communities, carried the knowledge westward. By 1882, variations of the design appeared in settlements across eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina. Some builders called them earth furnaces. Others used the term stone batteries. A few families, knowing the origin, called them Drummond foundations. But the name mattered less than the principle. The earth, when properly coupled to living space through adequate thermal mass and intelligent airflow, could moderate temperature year-round with minimal fuel input. The technique even reached the attention of a visiting engineer from Knoxville, who published a brief article in the Mechanics' Monthly Journal in March 1883, describing an ingenious vernacular application of thermodynamic principles observed in the Smoky Mountain region, wherein settlers have achieved remarkable climate control through subsurface stone chambers and earth-coupled convection loops. The article was dry, technical, and reached perhaps 200 readers, but it documented the knowledge in print, preserving it beyond oral tradition. Josiah Drummond never sought recognition. He built 2 more cabins using the system, one for his eldest son in 1881, another for a widowed neighbor in 1884, and continued farming his slope plot. When visitors asked why he'd share the technique so freely instead of patenting it or charging consultation fees, his answer was always the same: "My father taught me." His father taught him. Knowledge dies when you hoard it. It lives when you give it away. By the time Josiah Drummond died in 1903 at age 71, an estimated 43 structures in the region incorporated his thermal mass system. Emma lived in their original cabin until 1911, still comfortable in winter, still cool in summer, still burning half the wood her neighbors required. The stone remembered. The earth gave back. The physics never lied. The stone chamber beneath Josiah Drummond's original cabin still exists. I know because I've stood in it. The cabin itself is gone, collapsed in the 1940s, reclaimed by forest, but the foundation remains. 8 feet down, those 4,000 pounds of sandstone still wait, fitted tight, engineered with precision by a man the experts called a fool. Modern building codes would never allow what Drummond built. We have regulations now, standardized systems, HVAC units that pump refrigerated air through ductwork at the cost of tremendous energy input. We've gained comfort and convenience. But we've lost something too, the understanding that the earth itself can be a thermal battery, that stone remembers, that passive systems can outperform active ones when designed with patient intelligence. Drummond's technique wasn't primitive. It was sophisticated thermodynamics applied with materials at hand. The principle of earth coupling that he used is now rediscovered by modern sustainable architects who call it ground source thermal mass and write doctoral dissertations about its applications. The convection loops he engineered are now analyzed with computational fluid dynamic software that confirms what he knew through observation and inherited wisdom. Air moves predictably when you understand density, temperature, and geometry. The tragedy isn't that we forgot Drummond's name. History forgets most names. The tragedy is that we forgot the principle. We dismissed earth-coupled thermal mass as old-fashioned, while spending billions on mechanical systems that accomplish the same goal less efficiently. We laughed at the idea of storing heat in stone while manufacturing electric thermal storage heaters that do exactly that at premium prices. There's a deeper lesson here about how we evaluate knowledge. When Drummond arrived in Cataract Creek with his Highland traditions, the educated experts saw primitive superstition. They saw a man digging holes where he should be raising walls, placing stone where it served no purpose, angling tunnels according to folk wisdom rather than Philadelphia engineering standards. They were so certain of their superior understanding that they publicly mocked him. But Drummond had something they lacked: multi-generational empirical knowledge tested against the hardest judge: survival. His father had lived through Highland winters where fuel was scarce and mistakes were fatal. His grandfather had refined techniques passed down through centuries of cold climate habitation. That knowledge wasn't written in textbooks, but it was written in survival rates, in fuel consumption records, in the lived experience of families who stayed warm or froze. The modern parallel is obvious. How often do we dismiss traditional knowledge as backward simply because it doesn't come with degrees and credentials? How often do we assume that newer equals better, that technological complexity equals superiority, that what our ancestors did must be inferior to what we do now? Drummond's story suggests we should be more humble, more curious, more willing to ask. What did they understand that we've forgotten? Before you click away, I need you to do 3 things. First, smash that like button if this story changed how you think about traditional knowledge and modern expertise. Second, subscribe to this channel because I've got dozens more stories like this: forgotten techniques, dismissed wisdom, pioneers who were right when the experts are wrong. And third, drop a comment telling me, where are you watching from? And is there a piece of traditional knowledge from your region that modern people have forgotten? I read every comment, and your stories might become future videos. Josiah Drummond died, believing he'd simply shared what his father taught him. He never knew his name would be largely forgotten. But the physics he trusted, the patient heat of stone, the reliable coolness of earth, the free work of convection, those principles are eternal. They worked in 1878. They work now. They'll work a century from now, long after our current HVAC systems are obsolete. The earth remembers. Stone stores and gives back. And sometimes, the man digging holes while everyone laughs understands more about staying alive than all the experts combined. That's not primitive thinking. That's engineering tested by the ultimate standard. It worked when failure meant death. The cabin is gone. The forest has reclaimed the land. But 8 feet down, the stone waits, cool in summer, warm in winter, patient and permanent. Drummond's folly, they called it. Until winter proved him right. Until summer proved him brilliant. Until the next generation learned what the previous generation should never have forgotten.